My dad, Jesse Lee Greenlee, was a dominant figure in my life growing up. He set the tone, the mood, the atmosphere in our house on a daily basis. We laughed a lot growing up, and there were days when grumpiness reigned. My fondest memory of him was on a day when he was grumpy and I was feeling quite ornery. He loved to make big bowls of popcorn and used a particularly large green Tupperware bowl. You remember those big green Tupperware bowls? Yes. And it was only for him. On this day, I hid behind the corner, and as he was walking towards the living room with his bowl of popcorn, I jumped out and yelled, "Boo!" He jumped in return, and popcorn went flying. Oh, he so tried to get angry. He so tried to get angry. I was on the floor laughing so hard, and he gave in and started laughing as well. The thing is, my dad would always try to jump scare my mom and sister and I. We would be driving in the car, and he would all of a sudden yell, "Boo!" My mom always jumped. She was with the man for over 50 years, and she always jumped. My sister and I eventually said, "Dad, stop." This is often how the lessons from my dad would show up. They were subtle and often just learned through his actions. This first lesson I view as a skill I take quite a bit of pride in. No, and it's not going around and scaring people. It's more about reading the room, reading people, paying attention to what's going on, how to break the tension, pivot a conversation, or just know if someone needs a boost. As with a good jump scare, you have to know how it will be received and determine how to set the stage for it to be a success, just as you do when you counsel someone or supervise an employee or preach a sermon to a congregation. I remember a Sunday up in Washington State where I had written a sermon and was about to step into the pulpit to deliver it. And I was looking out at the people gathered in the pews and observing and realizing as my heart sunk that the sermon I wrote was not the sermon they needed. The congregation that week had suffered a major shocking loss in their community, and that sermon was written before that loss was realized. So I set the sermon aside and preached a sermon from my heart. Knowing how to read a room full of people allowed me to show up in the way they needed that Sunday. It wasn't a jump scare, but it had the same kind of boost to the spirit of the community. Sometimes the lessons from my dad would show up in frustrating and complicated ways. While growing up, I was a typical child who would ask one parent for something and be told to ask the other parent for the answer. I always went to my mom first, even though I knew most often she would send me to my dad. I didn't like going to ask my dad because without a doubt, every time I would go to ask for something, before I would even get the question fully out, he would say no. I would get so frustrated because I didn't feel like I was heard, would think it was unfair, and sometimes I just got grumpy and just chose not to ask the question. There are times when he was teasing me and let me ask the question without interrupting again, and other times the first no was the answer, and there was no chance of getting that question fully stated. His reasoning, I later learned, was he didn't want me to be afraid of hearing the answer no. I don't think his method was necessarily sound. But the lesson of not being afraid of the answer no has definitely shaped my courage in asking for what I want or need. Whenever I am undecided on whether I want to ask a question, I do hear him clearly in my mind saying, "What's the worst answer you can get?" No. And I know that going in, and if no is not the worst, then by imagining what the worst answer could be, then I can prepare myself to hear it and still determine the steps I need to take. Even though his method could have failed miserably, the ability to ask questions without a fear of what the answer might be has served me well. It has given me the courage to ask hard questions when people's lives were at stake, or to push back against unfair practices, or to determine when someone, like my dad, was ready to stop cancer treatment. And that question and that answer was not no. My dad, Jesse Lee Greenlee, died on October 2018 and left me another lesson, which is to live life to the fullest, because you never know when that privilege will be taken away. My dad was loving, oh so complicated, funny, and frustrating, and I'm still learning the subtle lessons he taught me in the time we had together on this earth.